AITA for not ordering food to avoid paying split bill. So, here's the whole backstory. I 30 male have been good friends with the guy, let's call him Jake, also 30 male, for a while. We've known each other since college, and we've stayed close over the years. We're the kind of friends who don't need to see each other all the time to still have that bond. So, when he started dating a girl, Sarah 28 female, about a year ago, I was really happy for him. He seemed super into her, and it was nice to see my friend in a good relationship. Over time, the three of us started hanging out together pretty often. I'd get invited to join them for dinners, events, and just casual hangouts. It was nice to feel included, and, honestly, I liked both of them a lot. At first, everything was pretty straightforward in terms of how we handled paying for things. Whenever we went out to eat, we just paid for ourselves. Jake would cover his own bill, and if Sarah was with us, he'd often pay for her too, which made sense, they're dating. I'd pay my own way, it's just how we did things. This unspoken arrangement worked well for everyone, and I never really thought twice about it. I appreciated that we were all on the same page, no awkward moments with splitting checks or anything. Jake and I are pretty practical guys, so we'd been used to handling things that way from the start. Then, a few months ago, it was Sarah's birthday. Jake wanted to make it special, and he invited me along to celebrate with them at a pretty nice restaurant. It wasn't our usual casual spot, this was a step up. I thought it was great that Jake wanted me there, it felt like he really valued our friendship. When we got to the restaurant, the three of us ordered whatever we wanted. I'll admit, they ordered a bit more than I did: appetizers, drinks, dessert, the whole works. But I didn't mind at all, because, hey, it was a birthday. It felt like a one-time thing where we just go with the flow. So, when the bill arrived, Jake suggested we split it evenly 3 ways in honor of Sarah's birthday. He said something like, let's keep it simple and just split it. I didn't really hesitate because I figured, why not? It's her special day, and this is my friend's girlfriend. I thought it was a nice gesture to help celebrate her birthday without getting bogged down in who ordered what. So, we split the bill evenly, and that was that. I didn't give it much thought afterward. But here's where things started to change. A couple of weeks later, the three of us decided to go out again. This time, it was just a regular evening, no special occasion, just a casual hangout at a different restaurant. We sat down, ordered our meals, and spent the evening chatting and laughing. I ordered my usual kind of meal, an entree and a drink, nothing too extravagant. Meanwhile, Jake and Sarah were going all out again. They ordered a couple of appetizers, each got a cocktail, and ended up splitting a dessert. At this point, I started noticing a pattern with how they ordered versus how I ordered, but I figured, whatever, it's their choice. I was just there for a good time. When the check came, Jake immediately suggested we split it evenly 3 ways, just like we had done on Sarah's birthday. Now, I was a bit taken aback. I thought splitting the bill evenly was a one-time thing for her birthday, a special occasion. So, I gently pushed back, saying, hey, I thought that was just a one-time thing for Sarah's birthday. I was trying to keep it light, but Jake's response caught me off guard. He said something like, oh, we just liked the simplicity of it last time. It's so much easier than figuring out who ordered what. I glanced at the bill, and, sure enough, their side of it was much higher than mine. I had kept my order modest, but their combined total was almost double what I'd ordered. I felt a bit uncomfortable and said, I just ordered a lot less than you guys. I'd prefer to just pay for my own meal, like we did before. I was trying to be respectful and clear, but Jake's tone shifted. He gave me this look, and his voice was a bit sharp as he said, come on, don't make it awkward. It's easier for everyone if we just split it evenly. Now, I was feeling genuinely uncomfortable. I could tell he didn't like that I was pushing back on the split, but I also felt it wasn't fair to cover part of their more expensive meals when I had purposely ordered within my budget. Then, Sarah chimed in, supporting Jake. She laughed a bit and said, it's no big deal. Friends shouldn't worry about these little things. She was trying to keep it lighthearted, but it felt like I was being guilted into going along with it. I had this weird feeling that they were both just expecting me to go along with it to avoid any tension. After a moment of hesitation, I agreed, but not without feeling resentful. I could tell it had been easier for them to just split the bill evenly, and it probably felt nice to not have to worrying about adding up their own totals. But, to me, it felt unfair, especially because I was being asked to pay for more than I'd actually consumed. But I didn't want to ruin the night or seem like I was being petty, so I went along with it. Then, it happened again. The next time we went out, they suggested splitting the bill evenly right off the bat, and I found myself in the same awkward situation. This time, I ordered even less, hoping they'd see that I wasn't on the same page with this new equal split arrangement. But when the check came, Jake said, "All right, let's just split it 3 ways." I tried to laugh it off and asked, "Is this how we're doing it every time now?" Sarah looked at me and said, "Yeah, it's so much simpler. We're all friends here, right?" I felt trapped. They were both looking at me, expecting me to just go along with it again. I didn't want to be the difficult one, but I also felt like they weren't respecting my boundaries. This wasn't how we had started, and I missed the simplicity of just paying for my own food without any pressure. But I could see that if I said no, it would create tension, and I valued our friendship. So now, here I am, wondering if I'm the asshole for wanting to go back to our original arrangement. It's not about the money, it's about feeling pressured into paying for things I didn't order and not being listened to. Part of me thinks I should just let it go to keep the peace, but another part of me feels like this situation is fundamentally unfair. Am I overthinking this, or am I justified in feeling like I should only pay for my own meal, like we did before? Update 1. Alright, so here's the continuation. About a week after that last uncomfortable dinner, I get a message from Jake. He tells me that he and Sarah are starving and asks if I want to join them at a restaurant that evening. Right away, I had a gut feeling that we were heading down the same road again. I mean, every time we'd gone out recently, the whole splitting the bill evenly thing kept coming up, and I was getting pretty tired of being pressured into it. I felt like I wasn't being heard, and it was starting to bother me more and more. But here's the thing, I didn't want to flat out say no and look like I was avoiding them. I value my friendships, and I didn't want to cause a rift, so I agreed to go, but I made a little plan of my own. That evening, I decided to eat a full meal before meeting up with them. I'm talking about the kind of meal that leaves you feeling completely stuffed. I figured, if I'm already full, then I won't have to order anything, which means I won't have to deal with splitting a bill for food I didn't even eat. This way, I could still hang out with them without feeling like I was being taken advantage of. When I arrived at the restaurant, I felt pretty confident in my plan. I was stuffed, and there was no way I'd be tempted to order anything. We sat down at the table, and right away, Jake and Sarah started looking over the menu, clearly starving and excited to order. I just sat there, sipping on a glass of water, feeling content and genuinely not hungry. They both ordered pretty much right away, going for appetizers, entrees, drinks, the whole shebang. It was like watching the same scene play out, except this time I was prepared. Eventually, Jake noticed that I wasn't ordering anything and looked a bit surprised. He asked me, almost incredulously, why I wasn't ordering, and I just casually told him that I'd eaten before coming and wasn't hungry. I assured him that I was just there to enjoy their company, nothing more. I could tell he was a bit thrown off by this. I mean, it probably seemed weird to him that I'd come to a restaurant already full, but I played it off, saying I'd just been really hungry earlier and decided to eat beforehand. He seemed confused but didn't push it too much, so I figured I was in the clear. Jake and Sarah's food eventually arrived, and they dove in, clearly enjoying their meal. I just sat there, smiling and chatting with them, sipping my water. They offered me some bites of their food here and there, but I politely declined, sticking to my plan. I didn't want there to be any room for misinterpretation. I wasn't eating, so there was no reason for me to chip in for the bill. I kept thinking to myself that maybe this was the only way to set a boundary with them. The meal went on, and I could feel an invisible shift in the air. Jake and Sarah were eating, laughing, and chatting as usual, but there was an underlying tension, almost like they were both vaguely aware of the fact that I wasn't participating in the meal. Every now and then, Jake would glance at me with a questioning look, maybe hoping I'd cave and order something small, even just a drink, but I stayed committed to my plan. I'd strategically position myself with just water in front of me, taking the occasional sip to at least look somewhat involved. I knew it looked odd, me sitting there with no food on the table, but I was prepared to ride out the awkwardness. As their dishes kept coming, Jake and Sarah seemed to be enjoying their meal without fully understanding why I wasn't joining in. I could see it start to sink in that I was serious about not ordering anything. Sarah even offered me a bite of her appetizer at one point, laughing lightly and saying, "Come on, at least try a little something." But I politely declined, sticking to my story about eating beforehand. I could see her trying to brush off the awkwardness with humor, but it was clear they were both caught off guard by my decision. When the main courses came, I could feel both their eyes on me as they began eating. Jake paused a couple of times, clearly on the verge of asking again if I was sure I didn't want anything, but he held back, probably sensing my resolve. Sarah, too, seemed a bit thrown off, like she was trying to piece together why I would agree to come to a restaurant if I wasn't planning on eating. But I just kept the small talk going, trying to steer the conversation toward casual topics, hoping to diffuse the tension that was building beneath the surface. Finally, when they were finished and the server brought the check, the moment I'd been anticipating arrived. Jake didn't miss a beat. He reached for the bill and, just like clockwork, suggested we split it. I could feel my heart race slightly, but I kept my cool, calmly sitting back and not making a move. They both paid their parts without a second thought, then looked expectantly at me, waiting for my contribution. But I didn't reach for my wallet. I sat there, feeling the weight of their stares, but I stayed resolute. I could see the confusion flicker across Jake's face, his eyes narrowing slightly as he processed what was happening. After a beat, he finally asked, genuinely puzzled, why I wasn't putting in any money. I looked back at him calmly and explained, as tactfully as I could, that since I hadn't ordered anything, I didn't see a reason to pay. I pointed out that I was only there for their company and that I hadn't eaten anything, so it didn't make sense for me to contribute to a meal I hadn't participated in. As I explained, I watched Jake's expression shift. His initial confusion turned to mild frustration, and I could see him struggling to understand or maybe just not wanting to accept what I was saying. Sarah sat quietly, but the look on her face said it all. She was clearly uncomfortable with the direction things were going. Jake, still processing, finally said something about how we're friends and how it should be no big deal to split things evenly, especially since we'd done it before. There was an implication in his tone, like I was the one making things awkward by refusing to chip in. He seemed genuinely put off by the fact that I wasn't automatically agreeing to this simpler way of handling the bill. I could tell that, in their minds, this arrangement was supposed to be seamless and easy. But I felt the tension building between us, and I could feel the silent judgment behind their stares, like I was somehow being petty or difficult. Jake's insistence that friends don't make a big deal about money hit me in a strange way. It felt like he was using our friendship to guilt me into compliance, rather than respecting the fact that I hadn't participated in the meal. As they both sat there, clearly caught off guard and annoyed, I realized that I was finally making my stance clear, even if it was uncomfortable for all of us. But at that point, I'd had enough. I calmly told him that friends respect each other's boundaries, and I wasn't comfortable splitting the bill when I hadn't ordered anything. I wasn't about to keep paying for food I didn't eat, especially after making my position clear. I thanked them for inviting me and got up to leave. I could see the look of surprise and maybe even a little anger on their faces as I walked out. I knew they hadn't expected me to stand up for myself like that. On the way home, I kept thinking about the whole situation. I felt a weird mix of satisfaction and guilt. Part of me was glad that I finally took a stand, but another part of me wondered if I'd overstepped somehow. I started questioning if I'd handled it the right way or if I'd just alienated two of my closest friends over a dinner bill. Update 2. A day after that uncomfortable restaurant visit, I got a message from Jake. I'd been half expecting something, but actually seeing his name pop up on my screen gave me this odd mix of dread and anticipation. He didn't waste any time getting straight to the point. According to him, the way I'd acted at the restaurant was out of line. He said it wasn't what friends do to each other, that friends don't pull stunts like eating before a meal out. The way he worded it made it sound like I'd somehow betrayed some unspoken code of friendship by daring to show up at a restaurant without ordering anything. He went on to say that now it was obvious to him why I'd eaten beforehand. The way he phrased it made it sound as if I'd orchestrated some elaborate plan to ruin their evening by daring to sit there with just a glass of water. He seemed genuinely offended, Like my decision to eat in advance was some kind of betrayal or a passive-aggressive move aimed directly at him and Sarah. He actually called it mean, his exact word, mean, to eat before going to a restaurant if you know you're going to split the bill. He was acting as though by simply showing up without an appetite, I'd broken some cardinal rule of friendship. According to him, it was rude of me not to tell them upfront that I wasn't planning to eat, as if my dietary choices were somehow his business. What struck me the most was his insistence that by not eating, I'd essentially forced them to cover the entire bill, as though my absence on the receipt was some tactical maneuver that left them burdened and blindsided. He painted this picture where they were left scrambling because I'd refused to contribute, even though I hadn't ordered a single thing. There was a clear implication that I was the one who had messed up the evening, who had broken the unspoken code that friends always share expenses evenly, no matter what. He said they had counted on me to split the check like we had before, framing it as if this new routine was somehow my responsibility to uphold without complaint. It was as if I'd failed them by not agreeing to support their night out financially. Jake went so far as to imply that they'd ordered more food than usual precisely because they'd been expecting me to cover part of the cost. The way he described it, they had been looking forward to a great night, ordering freely and enjoying themselves, under the assumption that I would step in to absorb a third of the hit. Reading this, I felt a strange, bubbling frustration start to build. The way he was framing things, it was as if I genuinely owed them for a meal I hadn't even touched. I could feel my jaw clenching as I read his words over and over, trying to understand how he twisted the whole situation to make me out as the bad guy. And worse, he was acting as if I'd done something sneaky and underhanded by simply deciding to eat before meeting them. In his mind, I'd essentially duped them, set them up for an evening of splurging only to pull out at the last second and leave them with the bill. But what he saw as mean was, in my mind, just a straightforward way to avoid yet another awkward bill-splitting scenario that I knew was coming. I'd done it to keep things simple, to make sure I wasn't again put in a position where I'd be forced to pay for food I didn't order or eat. Yet, in Jake's view, I had plotted this somehow with malicious intent, as though I'd spent my afternoon calculating how best to teach them a lesson or make some silent protest. Nothing could have been further from the truth, but the way he was seeing it, I was the one who'd broken our friendship code. But the more I read his words, the clearer it became that Jake saw my actions as a personal insult or even a betrayal. To him, my choice to sit there and not eat was some symbolic gesture meant to undermine him and Sarah, an affront to our friendship because I hadn't blindly gone along with the easy way they decided was our new normal. It didn't seem to matter to him that we never even discussed this new arrangement. It didn't matter that, up until recently, we'd all just paid for our own meals without issue. All he saw was that I wasn't supporting their vision of what a simple evening out should be, and that to him was enough to brand me as uncooperative, maybe even selfish. I couldn't believe that he was so fixated on his own perception of fairness that he couldn't even consider my perspective, as though he were blind to the fact that it might feel unfair on my end, too. He made it sound as if I'd ruined the evening, that by not participating, I'd somehow thrown a wrench in their plans for a fun night out. But here's the thing that got under my skin. They had assumed from the start that I'd just fall in line and pay. They'd planned the entire evening with that assumption, ordered with that assumption, and now here was Jake, acting as if I'd let them down by not holding up my end of this unspoken deal. It struck me as incredibly unfair. Like he was shifting the responsibility for their spending choices onto me. They hadn't even asked me if I was okay with the split, hadn't mentioned beforehand that they'd be expecting me to cover a third of their bill. It was all just assumed, like it was a given. Like my role in the evening was to support their night out financially, whether I participated in the meal or not. So, I took a moment to calm down and started typing out my reply. I explained that I didn't think I should have to pay for their food, especially when I hadn't ordered anything myself. I reminded him of how we used to handle things back before all this splitting nonsense started. Each person paid for what they ordered. That's how it had been for years. I told him that when we split the bill on Sarah's birthday, I thought it was a one-time thing, a way to celebrate her. I'd agreed to it willingly that night because it was her special day, but now it seemed like they'd taken that as a green light to make splitting the bill the new normal. And I was never given a say in that. They'd just assumed that was okay with me. I laid it all out, saying that I felt uncomfortable being pressured to cover food I hadn't ordered and that I didn't appreciate being made to feel like I had to go along with this new arrangement. I explained that I'd only eaten before meeting them because I didn't want to be stuck paying for food I didn't eat. I didn't think it was mean or sneaky, it was just my way of maintaining some boundaries without making things awkward. I made it clear that I wasn't comfortable with this new way of handling bills and that from now on, I'd only be paying for what I ordered, like we'd always done in the past. Jake's response came pretty quickly, and I could tell he wasn't happy. He didn't seem to understand why I was making such a big deal out of something he saw as a convenient way of handling things. To him, splitting the bill evenly was a simple solution, and he couldn't wrap his head around why I was resisting it. He seemed genuinely baffled that I wouldn't just go along with it, like he saw it as some kind of betrayal that I wasn't willing to share the cost equally with them. He implied that I was somehow ruining the vibe by refusing to just be a friend and split things. I could tell he was disappointed, maybe even a bit hurt, that I wasn't willing to just go along with what he thought was a fair setup. But I couldn't shake this feeling of resentment. I felt like he was ignoring my perspective entirely and only seeing it from his own point of view. In his mind, I was the one being difficult, the one causing the problem. But from where I stood, they were the ones changing the rules on me and then acting like I was the bad guy for not playing along. It seemed like Jake was so fixated on this idea of friendship meaning splitting everything evenly that he couldn't see how unfair it was to expect me to cover their orders just because they wanted an easier way to pay. The whole situation left me feeling frustrated and disappointed. I valued our friendship, but it felt like he was pushing me into a corner, trying to guilt me into doing something that I fundamentally disagreed with. It made me question how much he actually respected my boundaries and if he even cared that I was uncomfortable with this new arrangement. It wasn't about the money for me, it was about feeling respected and not being pressured into paying for something I hadn't agreed to. Now I have decided for myself that in the future I will only pay for my account, and they can decide for themselves whether to be offended by it or not.